And so I try to acknowledge and validate. Obviously the feelings are real, the disappointment is real, and you can sit in that for a minute, but then like, okay, we gotta move on. We have other things to do, and like you can't take that pain into the next room because somebody is waiting for you. Somebody wants you to be the answer to this call because they want to go home. So it's like, okay, please be it, you know. And if you go in there with that, with just a clean slate, I think you can be better, you know. But it's a process, and there are certain times when it's like, God, I really wanted that, you know. And people are heartbroken, you know. I've had many calls with people in tears, and all I can say is you did everything that you possibly could. It's not about you. You know, you can only control what you can deliver and what you have, and sometimes it's they wanted a blonde and not a brunette, or they needed somebody who fit that costume, and you just can't take that personally. You know, it is called show business for a reason, and I try to always remind my clients and my peers about that because we get so caught up in the show, and especially in sort of conservatory training, it's about how well you can act and sing, and I'm like, look, everybody's young, everybody's cute, everybody's talented, but what do you do that's different than the next person? And I think if you can hold on to that, then it makes you a bit more unique when you walk into the room.
Okay, so let's talk about you getting into the producing space. How did that happen for you?
So that's the reason why I moved to New York. I wanted to be a Broadway producer, and about a little over a year.
Wait a minute. Who grows up and wants to be a Broadway producer?
Well, so I would say I was grown. I was adult technically. When I was in college, I used to come to New York every year to visit a friend who went to Columbia, and I would crash in her dorm room and wake up at 6 a.m. and get rush tickets.
Okay.
And you know, while she was in class, I would be in line for the tickets, and then she'd get out of class, and we go to dinner, we go see a show. And I started saving all of my playbills, and you know, as little mementos, and I would read the bios, and that's when I really discovered like a producing title. And then I just went down like a deep dive. Well, what do they do? You know, and I thought, oh, they work with contracts, they do negotiation, they're creative. That sounds interesting. This is a mix of all those worlds. Didn't know if I was gonna be good at it, but you don't know unless you try. So I had been in New York about a year, and I tend to have little check-ins with myself like a typical Virgo.
Wait a minute, you're a Virgo too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very type A. So I'm like, okay, you've been here for a year, you moved here to produce, you're not producing anything. What are you doing? And almost in tandem, one of my best friends is an actress, and her Wi-Fi was out, so she came to my apartment to use my internet. And I discovered that this guy was doing a production of The Wild Party at Columbia. So many roads like start with Columbia for me, even though I didn't go there. And I just said, well, I like that musical, I like the music, I'm gonna write to him and say I wanna work on it. And so I did, and he later told me that he almost ignored the email because he had so many emails from actors, like trying to get auditions, but he was like, okay, he was like, you know there's no money involved with this. I said, I know, I just wanna get some experience, and he said, okay, let's meet. So we met for a drink, we talked, and you know, about the show, about life, about producing, about creating, and he was like, I would really love for you to work on this. Just let me get permission from the department, because I don't think they've ever had anyone outside. And so the department approved it, and that was the first time that I ever produced anything. And that then took me from an idea in my mind, like, I think I could be good at this, to like, oh, I'm good at this. Like, I can do it. Like, I can, you know, have designer meetings. I can, you know, raise a little bit of money. And by the way, he duped me because he was like, this production is going to cost $5,000. The production, I mean, the school's giving me 3 and my aunt's going to give me 2. Then we got in the weeds and it was like, actually it's going to cost 10. Can you help? And I was like, okay. So I went to law school, I went to business school. By that point, like, you know, my friends were like making a little bit of money. So I just literally, I wrote them all letters. And I just said, I'm doing this show, like, you know, I moved to New York to be a producer. I had this opportunity, it's with Columbia, it's a tax write-off. can you donate? So all of my friends wrote $200 checks and helped me put on this show. So that was the first time that I ever raised money. And in a full circle moment, that director was Saheem Ali, who I did Fat Ham with, which was his Broadway debut as a director and my debut as a lead producer. So, 16 years later.
And Saheem was nominated for a Tony Award, as was the show. And your Morehouse brother, James Imes, wrote the show. And as Ariana DuBose would say, they did a thing. They did a thing on Broadway. What were the next steps for you going from the graduate school production at Columbia? What was next for you?
I produced a reading of a play with somebody I used to work with. It's like, oh, you're producing now, do my play. And so I was like, okay, I've never done a reading, but he was like, he just helped me. The writer just helped me, just called all these fancy people, and they just came and did this reading for free. And I was like, I don't have any money, but I can organize it. And so, we got like Sandy Duncan and Ali Sheedy and like people like that who basically all I had to pay for was lunch. And they did this reading for me. But then in tandem, Saheem put this book in my hand and said, I read this in high school, I wanted to make it a musical, will you work on it with me? And so we spent, a number of years, the show is still developing now, but in like the next 10 years, we worked on 4 projects together. So I was just developing new work, going off Broadway and concerts and readings and workshops, just like honing my craft and understanding how to really break apart a script, how to develop a show dramaturgically, and just kind of building those stepping stones to the next chapter, which included also meeting other producers and meeting other investors to eventually get to the Broadway dream.
So you're now producing. What do you look for in a work that makes you say, yes, I want to share this with an audience?
The me in 2023? Because it might have been different when I started out.
Let's do both of them. What was it like for you when you first started out, and what is it like for you now that the stakes are higher?
Yeah. I just want to distinguish, because in the beginning, I'm sure it's similar to acting and directing, you just want an opportunity to do something. You just want to be in a room, you're like trying to be selective about content, but you really just want to do the thing. So I think in the beginning it was like, how do I just keep opening doors, and how do I just keep kind of growing? And now I'm still growing, obviously, but I've grown a bit more, and so now I just bring it down to 2 things. I want to work on good projects, and I want to work with good people. Because it's just too hard to deal with drama. And so I just like good storytelling, to be honest. I have eclectic taste. I've now produced 8 Broadway shows. I've produced sort of in every category, from new musical to revival of a musical to new play to revival of a play. And the one thing that I think that they all had in common is that they were great stories. And I think most of them, I would say, also started a conversation, not only in the theater, but out of the theater. And that's important for me. It doesn't have to be a diverse show, but I tend to lean towards things that have some level of diversity, either in the writing or on stage. But yeah, it really just comes down to, do I believe in it? Can I sell it? Can I speak passionately about it? Because I've literally gotten investors just from my excitement about a project. Not even pitching them, but just be like, I'm working on this thing and I'm really excited about it. And they're like, I want to be a part of that excitement. And so, so that's been great. And then the other part is just like, do I believe in you as a producer, as a writer, as a director? Like, can we collaborate together? when we are all exhausted and we've been in the theater from, 10 a.m. to midnight, do I want to be in there with you? Or do I want to run for the hills? These are important questions to ask, because you both have some really, really tough conversations and some tough situations, and you need to know who has your back and who do you vibe with.
What was your first Broadway show, and how did you become involved with it?
My first Broadway show was American Son with Kerry Washington. And one of my clients is an actor and also a producer, and he just asked me if I wanted to do it with him. So, just relationships. That's how I got in the door.
Okay. Can you tell people what it takes to be a producer? What has to happen? Is there any kind of what is the term I'm looking for? Is there any kind of financial, the financials that are involved with it? LLCs, how is the business of producing done?
May I clarify the types of producers?
Yes,
for answering
please.
that? So typically on Broadway you have maybe 4 types of producers. You have your general partner or your lead producer. They're the ones who you will see at the very, very top line. There could be anywhere from 1 to 4 people, usually up on the top. And then below them you have co-producers, who are the people that they bring on to help them raise money. And then you may have an associate producer who, may help with the day-to-day and or is often the assistant of the lead producer. And then you have executive producers who are not responsible for raising money, but they may also help sort of with the day-to-day of the business. But typically you have the first 2, the general partner or the co-producer. If you're a co-producer, your main responsibility is raising money. The lead producer may say, we have $5 million to raise, and we have, 3 different slots that you can take. For Fat Ham, we had 3. It was 125 or above, 250 or above, or 400 and above. And each one came with different deal terms. And that's pretty much it. You go out and raise that money. It's usually $25,000 a unit for a play. Sometimes also for a musical, but for bigger budget musicals, it can be $50,000 a unit, which means if you want to invest in the show, the minimum that you can put in is either $25,000 or $50,000. Then once you raise that money, you're kind of off the hook, even though you'll be invited to co-producer meetings or marketing meetings where they may ask, for input. They may kind of talk to you about the strategies that they're doing. Oh, we're trying to decide whether we should do this New York Times ad or not. We're trying to figure out if we want to do more digital, if we want to do radio. But at the end of the day, the lead producer is the one making the decision, even though they may take, your opinions. And then as a lead producer, I like to think of it as sort of the CEO of the company. You're sort of, every decision stops and starts with you. So you're hiring everyone from directors to designers, you're putting together the budget with your general manager, you're figuring out the marketing strategies, the advertising, the press, when do you announce, when do you put tickets on sale, when do you bring on someone like Marcia to help with audience development and groups, sort of all those things. So almost a year ago I got on board with Fat Ham as we were preparing for Broadway. So let's say in August or so I started working on the show. Then between August and October we set up our pitch meetings with the marketing agencies that we sort of wanted to meet with and the press people. And then once we selected who we wanted to move forward with, it came down to, okay, let's put together a timeline for the show. So we knew we wanted to announce before the holidays because we wanted to have at least 3 months leading up to previews so that we can have a little bit of advance, and get some ticket sales because post-COVID, nobody's really buying in advance. But we wanted to at least have as much of a runway as possible in order for the show to be set up for success. So December 5th became go day. So everything needed to be ready in terms of copy, the image, that we were going to use, all the press strategies from that day, and then picking the opening night, casting, were we gonna use the same cast from the public, were we gonna replace anyone, were we gonna replace any designers, and we did replace one, and that became a very dramatic process of then, well, what's the buyout for that person? So the lead producer is in charge of all of these decisions, and then once the show is getting into performances, then you're trying to figure out ticket sales, ticket prices. Okay, this night is not full. Marcia, can you get us some more groups? Okay, great, you got this more groups. Like, how do we do it for the next week? Trying to figure out all of the sales so that we can make money and that so we can keep the lights on. So the lead producer is really the one making all of those decisions. So I like to distinguish between the two. Not that one is more important than the other, but just one has more responsibility. And the second one is a co-producer. You know, you can raise it. Some people just buy their way in. Some people just say, I want to be a producer and here's a $250,000 check and put my name above the title. You know, that is, yes, they are a producer in title, but I mean, they are an investor first, you know, so, but those are the main responsibilities.
Let's continue with that hand, because you had amazing co-producers, but you had two amazing co-producers that brought some more notoriety to the production. Can you share about what it was like to work with Coleman Domingo and also Cynthia Arrigo?
Yeah, it was really fantastic. You know, they really gave their time and their name to the show to be able to expand the reach. And both of them have connections to someone on the team, which made it even more special. They weren't just doing it as like a vanity project. I just want my name on something. But, you know, Coleman has, you know, known James and Saheem a long time. James was an actor. He worked with Coleman in one of his shows. Saheem has directed one of Coleman's shows. Cynthia and my producing partner Mandy and her manager have a long relationship. So that was really cool to be able to say, like, we're taking a chance on a show on Broadway with a first-time writer, a first-time director, and 7 actors that no one knows. Even though they are all amazing and very talented. We saw this season when you have Samuel Jackson and Jessica Chastain and Sean Hayes, that's where people are going to naturally, you know, flock. And so how do we cut through the noise? And I think Cynthia and Coleman helped us do that. They helped us, you know, expand our reach. Coleman was very, very generous and got us, you know, a lot of in-kind services. He threw a huge party for us.
That party was fun.
I mean, it wasn't an opening night party, but it's the best opening night party I've ever been to.
Yeah.
Roller disco theme, drag queens, DJs, barbecue, candy stations, disco balls. Like it was
fun.
Yes.
it was a lot.
It was great. And so not only did we have a great celebration, but then we actually got like traction out of that. You know, we got more press out of it. We got more marketing out of that. All of those things that that help and that make a difference when you're putting on a show.
Did the Pulitzer help?
Yes. The Pulitzer helped, and the Off-Broadway run helped because there was so much buzz and excitement because it was like you couldn't get in at the public, or many people couldn't get in, so they were like, oh, I have a second chance. So yeah, I think all of it helped build the momentum to get where we were.
You talked about cutting through the noise. What are some of the other challenges that you've met with as a producer?
Well, things are a lot different even now than they were 3 years ago because of COVID.
Yes.
You know, we spent a year and a half sitting at home, right? So we got accustomed to comfort and easy access and being able to, you know, be on Netflix or Hulu or whatever. Then when we got excited about coming back, we bought our tickets, we wanted to be the first to support because it had been a while. And then shows got canceled because of COVID, because of this and that, not having enough coverage. And so I think audiences have gotten a bit more accustomed to like, well, I'm gonna just wait till closer to the date because I know it's gonna happen. And as a producer, that is very nerve-wracking to wake up on a Tuesday morning when you have a 720-seat theater and to know that only 500 tickets have been sold for that evening. And so you're trying to scramble to figure out how to get it together. How do we add a couple more discounts? Do we, and then with Fat Ham, like miraculously by 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 200 tickets would be sold. So we would go from 500 to 700 in a span of 5 or 6 hours, which you're like, that happened. But then you're like, damn, could that have happened like a week or two ago? So you're scrambling. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges is just the not knowing and trying to figure out how to get the ticket sales, but also get them at a competitive price. Because you can fill the house, but if every ticket is discounted, your weekly profit is not going to not cover your expenses, and then you're running at a loss. So I think we're also trying to navigate that a bit, how to adjust to this new normal, because money talks, and if you are not able to meet those expenses, then you're gonna close.
Triumphs. Could you share just one with us? Or
A triumph?
Yeah. Yeah, what was, or should I say, what was your favorite moment?
Just in general? I mean, I have so many.
Okay.
I've had a good career. I will say, specifically with Fat Ham, I did a panel at the Museum of Broadway back in February, and somebody asked what would success look like for this show, and I said I'm going to give you an answer as a producer, I'm going to give you an answer as a human. As a producer, of course, recoupment and making money would be successful, but I said as a human being, if we can just change one life, that would be success. And somebody yelled from the back, "You already have." And that felt really great because he had seen the production 4 times off Broadway and was so excited to come back. And I feel like we did something very important, and I'm very proud of that. My friend came to see the show. He's not black, he's white, but gay, and grew up in the South, and so had a very hard time in the 90s, trying to be seen and feel whole and as a human. And he came to see the show, and after he just hugged me and sobbed and said, "Thank you for this, I feel so seen." And I think those moments are great reminders of why we all do what we do, because it's not always going to make money, but we have the ability to really change a lot of lives and to make a difference. And so for that, I will always cherish that moment.
Okay.
And of course, the biggest triumph ever is winning the Tony for Top Dog Underdog.
Yeah.
Probably the highlight of my career, being able to work with all those giants on such a great play. And then to be able to walk on stage with all of them was really just a cherry on the Sunday.
Yeah, I was at home cheering for you. I love the play. Worked on the first one, the won the Pulitzer 20 years earlier, and I thought that this particular production was so stunning. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. One of my favorites of this past season. The actors were, let's say that Kenny Leon put his foot in it.
Yeah, they were electric.
Yeah, they were electric. They were quite wonderful. One last question from me. Yesterday, and I told you this earlier, yesterday I went to a session, and we got to see a TED Talk from someone, and she talked about her I am statement. What is your I am statement?
That's a great question. I will say I am the embodiment of infinite possibilities.
Oh.
I shared with you very briefly downstairs, you know, when I moved to New York, there were no black producers.
Right.
Specifically no lead producers on Broadway. There are many that have come, you know, through, but not when I moved to New York, you know, and it wasn't for a couple more years when Stephen and Aaliyah came with Cal and the Hot Tin Roof that we had any sort of representation, and then there were 13 years went by before we had any more. And so, you know, being able to be here and speak with all of you and just share a little bit of my story is important to me, because I don't want to be the only one in rooms anymore. I want people to know that it's a possibility. And I always joke with people that, you know, I get asked to do things like this all the time, and I'm like, you know, I'm a producer for a reason. Like, I actually like being behind the scenes and not, you know, speaking and things. But I feel like if this gives somebody the motivation or the knowledge that it's possible, and that there are other things that one can do besides being an actor or being a director, like that there are producers, there are company managers and casting directors and stage managers, it's very important for us to have that representation.
Yes. Okay. All right, let's open it up for some questions. Please, Lauren.
And you talk about, you know, sometimes you have to figure out how to monetize and make sure you're making enough money to pay everybody that week. When do you, at some point, you know, or not necessarily you, but in general as a producer, that we may have to just go ahead and, you know, close the show? And how does that feel? When do you know? I mean, when is it?
Well, you're assessing on a daily basis. You're looking at the numbers, you're looking at ticket sales, you're looking at the advance. And it's pretty clear. Whether you want to admit it or not, it's pretty clear. And so I think, you know, it just comes down to how much money do we have in the bank, what are ticket sales looking like, and how long can we realistically go? Because remember, when you close, there's going to be more expenses that come along. You got to get the set out the theater, you know what I mean? There's all those closeout costs. And so there are times when if you don't go soon enough, you're going to be in debt. And I've learned. One thing that people don't talk about with producing, because they only talk about the shiny stuff, is when you're a general partner, you are responsible for everything, including the liability. When that show closes at a loss, you and your partners have to come up with that money. And if you don't come up with it, you got to pay for it out of your own pocket. And I have been in a situation where I'm like, ooh, they saved me some, going from trying to like dig out of that hole, and that is something that you have to take very seriously. And so assessing those numbers and assessing those sales is really what is paramount during the process. And literally from the time we started until the time we made the decision to close, we were looking at those numbers. And that was how we made our decision.
Yeah.
Quick thing, Coleman Domingo got his start as a young actor in my theater in San Francisco, the African American Shakespeare Company, and he's a dear friend of ours as well, so
Incredible.
Kudos to Coleman being mentioned. Quick question, the movie, The Graduate, right, Dustin Hoffman, we've all seen that. There's a story behind that casting, I don't know if you're aware of it, where the casting directors went to Harvard and Princeton and all these Ivy League colleges to find that, and I'll say the word, Aryan type white dude with, you know, muscular. And when Dustin found out that they were casting this show, he went to his agent. I'm asking you to put your agent hat on for a second. He went to his agent and said, "Get me in that door." And the agent's like, "But Dustin, you're like 5'4", you know, come on, man, get me in that door." But Dustin, I can't. They're looking for these, you know, 6'2", da-da-da-da. He said, "Get me in that door." And who can imagine The Graduate without Dustin Hoffman, right? So has there been a time that you have pushed an actor as an agent to a place where, you know, the director or the producers are like, you know, we want type A. And you're like, I've got a type R actor here. Come on, see my actor. And good, bad, or indifferent happened, or the other way around, where the actor comes to you and say, get me in that door. I know I can do Could you share any stories like that or anything similar?
Yeah, it happens all the time. I
Right.
mean, I've had it go both ways. I've had it where they push actors like, get me in the room, and they delivered and got the role. And I've seen it where they're like, get me in, and then they didn't even get a call back. So it happens on both ways, but I will say, yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a career-defining role, but it was an off-Broadway show that one of my clients did a while ago, and the casting directors wouldn't see him at all. And I pushed, and they wouldn't see him at all, but he really wanted to do it, and he really believed in it. So he just went to an open call. He was like, they're gonna see me. He went to the open call, and they were like, oh. And so they called him back, and then he ended up booking it. So it was a little bit of a team effort, right?
Yeah.
You know, like he had to make the decision on whether he wanted to humble himself to go to that, you know, as opposed to just having an agent submission. But yeah, I think that anyone can have a story. You know, even when you're a star.
True.
You know what I mean? I remember reading a story with Rebecca Luker. She did The Music Man on Broadway. They didn't want to see her. She had just done Showboat with Susan Stroman, was nominated for a Tony, and they did not want to see her for Marion. And somehow she still pushed and was able to get in, and they ultimately cast her.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
That's great.
It happens all the time, even when you're a star.
May I ask a follow-up real quick? So sorry. Have you recommended a coach to any of your clients? An acting coach or a singing coach? Could you share a story about that, or is it something that most agents do?
Yeah. I'm assuming you're asking because it's sometimes a delicate and vulnerable conversation.
Yes.
Because I'm not saying that you can't act.
Right. Exactly.
I'm just saying that
exactly. That's why I'm asking.
there were moments.
Yes.
Absolutely. Listen, I am a ride or die manager. I'm very honest. My clients know that I am blunt, but not malicious. And if I'm telling you, it's because I care. And I would just say, like, hey, this is something that you haven't done before, or this is something that can use a little bit of
Judging.
yeah, and like why not be the best? Great example. So Fat Ham, I knew that every actor and understudy was going to move to Broadway except for one. And I had a client that was right for that role. And I said, I called her, I said, would you want to do this? And she said, yes. And I said, great, you can audition. Nobody will know that we're together. You're going to have to get it on your own. So she put together the self-tape, and I watched it, and I was like, there was two roles that she did. I was like, one, absolutely perfect. I said, the other, that's not it. I was like, I know it's not it. And then in tandem, the casting director had reached out and said, have her call me. And the casting director coaxed her on the phone for 30 minutes because she believed her and thought she could do it. And then so she retaped it before they sent it over to the director and writer for approval. And when she sent me that tape, I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
Now, the director knew that she was my client, but no one else did. And so when he saw her tape, he loved it so much, he said, do not call her back. Do not even have a casting session, offer her the role. And then I get a text from everyone like, this is who we want to approve. Does everybody approve? And I waited until everyone said yes. And then they were like, Rashard, what do you think? I was like, yeah, I think that'll do.
Nice, well
And
played.
then when they found out that she was my client, they were like, oh my
Well
God.
played.
You know?
That's
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, please.
You're a manager for actors that have representation already on an agent.
Some do, some don't.
Yeah, for actors that already have an agent. A lot of students say, well,
What's the difference?
yeah, we know the difference of, I think I need a manager. Why do you think you need a manager versus agent? What do you
I think it depends on where you are in your career and what you want. Sometimes people are with agents that are very big and they don't feel like they get a lot of attention or they're not accessible. And then some people just want a little bit more possibilities. I started working with a guy about 4 years ago who had booked a couple of Broadway shows, but he really wanted to work in TV and film. And his agent just wasn't getting him into the rooms that he wanted to get into. So he asked if he could meet with me because he knew a couple of my other clients. And within like a year, he booked 3 episodics. And it was just a change in energy. You know, he was still with the agents, but like I was able to fill in that gap. He was like, I don't know why I'm not being seen for these offices. I was like, oh, I actually have pretty good relationships with them. I'll reach out. And he was able to get that. And so some people want it for more opportunities. Some people just want to like, I just need somebody to brainstorm with. Like, this person is getting me auditions, but I want to figure out like, how do I better represent myself in the room? How do I make sure like my pictures are good, make sure my website is good? And there are some agents that will do that, but I think, you know, their primary responsibility is really about the procurement of work.
Right.
Whereas a manager, some will help get work, but they're really about the strategic guidance and advising. And so if you can afford that, it can be very beneficial. It's cost prohibitive for some people because then you're paying 10%, another 10%, or sometimes 15%. And if you're only doing regional gigs or small, you know, episodics, it can, you know, it can hurt. But I always say 20% of something is better than 0.
Yeah.
So,
Rochelle,
Hi, Michelle from Detroit. 2 little questions. One has to do with your roster of clients. How do you choose them, and how big do you want to get them? You have a lot of clients. And the other one has to do with the Broadway system and getting into the theaters, which is a whole nother thing. You know,
I'm
so
going through the battle right now, so I
yeah.
get
So if
it.
you could speak to those 2 things.
Yeah, so a lot of my clients are referrals from other people. They're either friends or colleagues of another client. Because I don't really go to a lot of showcases. I really try to be small. You know, I have about 40 clients.
Oh.
And I don't really want to be much bigger than that, a little less, but just because I'm also producing and I want to make sure that I'm accessible and that I'm able to give people the attention that they deserve. So a lot of it comes down to just somebody referring to me, to be honest, and me kind of reviewing materials and seeing if they're a good fit for me. Do I believe in them? Do I want to advocate for them? And also, by representing them, is it worth the time that it's going to take away from somebody that I already have?
Right.
So I try to assess that realistically. And then in terms of the Broadway real estate,
Yes.
you know, we're all on the queue, you know, and it's about timing, and it's about relationships, and just trying to make sure that they see the value of the project, because again, they're the gatekeeper. And you know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Do you have anything that was really great that you couldn't get in the theater?
I'm only on my 2nd attempt. Fat Hand was #1, and so last year I produced a musical off Broadway called Little Red Blue about Nina Simone, and so I'm working to bring that to Broadway, and so now I'm trying to just find the right theater, because for that show I need something a little bit more intimate. I don't think a 1,600 seat theater is going to be right for a show with only 4 people on stage. So they just have to become available. But I'm just, you know, gently following up, reminding them that we're here, and also trying to just add a little bit more shininess to cut through the mess.
Thank you.
yeah, Yvonne.
I am the embodiment of infinite possibilities. What's the next infinite possibility in your dream?
I just want to tell good stories, and I want to work in every medium. I want to do Broadway, I want to do TV, I want to do film. I want to do all those things, and I want to work with good people. So for me, it's about just enhancing relationships. It's about finding good projects, and just creating those stepping stones, and recognizing that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, I spent 11 years from the time I did Wild Party until the time I did American Son was about 11 years. And I'm glad that I took my time and didn't just do a Broadway show for the sake of doing a Broadway show. You know, I can say that there was intentionality with every show that I did, and I learned something and I grew from each one of them. Whereas I had friends who are a lot younger than I am were producing a lot earlier, but they were doing things that they were really honest that they weren't proud of.
Hmm.
And that they would probably delete it from the bio if they could, you know? So for me, it's like, you know, and I didn't think about this, I thought about it, but I didn't think about it as deeply. But when people will come up to me and they'll say, I love your body of work. Or I've been watching you and I like the projects that you pick. I'm like, oh, that's a reminder to just try to keep my integrity. Now, I'm not saying that everything that I do is good. I'm not saying that everything that I do will be good. But I should be proud of it. I should, you know, be able to advocate for why I did it, even if it ultimately didn't turn out as good as I wanted it to. But that I can back it up and say I didn't just sell out and do this because it was a check or that because it was working with this person.
Yes, Marcia.
The steps to Broadway, is the first step you, the one that want to produce the show, thinks this is a great piece? And then do you have to get a significant debut, public theater or somewhere to start the ball rolling, to get other people on board with what I think is great?
Depends on your relationships. To answer your first question, yeah, it comes down to you believing in a project and also having a vision for it. And also being honest about where it should be. Not every show's a Broadway show. You know, some things should just be regional, some should be off-Broadway, some should tour, some should be Broadway. You know, every now and again you'll find a show that is not seemingly commercial that then can find a home on Broadway. Like I was talking to the lead producer of Six. When he was approached about it, the writers were just like, we just want a small off-Broadway production. His vision was like, no, it's a Broadway show. And it's probably the most profitable Broadway show right now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Concert.
6 women and a microphone, you know? But that, that was his vision, you know, whereas other people may have said, oh no, we'll just do it in a little black box. But there are shows that open cold on Broadway. I mean, they don't always do well, but Book of Mormon didn't start anywhere else, just open, but obviously that is the creators of South Park. But Grey House, I think they did a developmental thing somewhere years ago, but it wasn't like an out-of-town tryout. So as a producer, it's really your responsibility to figure out the plan and what's going to help the momentum. Some shows may open cold, some shows may start regionally at La Jolla or ART, some may go to London, some may go to Canada. So it's about you sort of putting that vision together and figuring out what's going to make the most sense for your show.
And I just wanted to say to those of you who are producers in here, there should be a pipeline from black theaters to Broadway. Because it does not happen. It does not happen. But we
Right.
have amazing talent, skill, experience in the black theater space. As quiet as it's kept, some of our biggest stars, who this man has worked with, Woody King Jr., but some of our biggest stars have come out of black theater, like Denzel and Samuel L. Jackson and LaTanya. All of those folks, right, got their start at New Federal Theater or National Black Theater or Negro Ensemble Company. You just talked about Coleman getting his start with you on the West Coast, so let's look at that. Let's really and truly look at that.
Absolutely, and create good work. I mean, James got his start at National Black Theater. This is how Fat Hand ended up, you know, coming to New York and being a co-pro between National Black Theater and the public, because Saheem and James did a play called Kill Move Paradise at NBT, and they wanted to do that again, I think, and Saheem said no, like I don't want to bring that play with everything we've already been through to have that trauma exist. So can we do something else? And so that was why Fat Ham initially happened.
Okay, you had a question. No, there was, yeah, okay, I got you, but so is she. You know, so, and you're next, and then you're next. Okay.
I have two questions. One is, have you always been this confident? And then the second question is, which is great. Second question is, what did your journey look like from, you said law school, then business school, or was it business school, then law school?
Business school.
Then law school, to the seat that you're in now. And you talked about that 11-year gap. Was, at any point on your journey, was there any sense of hesitation, fear, doubt, struggle, sacrifice that almost rocked you from continuing in this, on this path? And that's why I asked, have you always been this path?
Yes, to answer your question.
I knew it.
Although I was very shy when I was younger, but I have a really amazing family, and it's not even about ego. I just think that everyone has always sewed into me, and no one's told me that I couldn't do anything. So I don't have a big fear of rejection. So I'm able to try things because I don't believe there's failure. I believe there's opportunity to learn in everything that you do, and as long as you try and you did your best, you can't fail. I've never been discouraged to the point where I wanted to quit. I had struggles, of course, like everyone else. I mean, in that 11-year time, I was hustling, I was learning, I was growing, and honestly just trying to figure out what that path would be. Again, because I don't come from a pedigree of producers or people who, I come from a line of people who are jobbers, who have a 9-to-5, they made a nice little life for themselves, but like, there's no generational wealth in my family. And it was really just slow and steady, and just relationships and building. And I ran into my friend Larry Powell here, and I met Larry because I was producing a reading that Billy Porter was directing, and Billy brought in Larry to do stage directions. And a couple months later, Larry called me and was like, I'm gonna connect you with Jocelyn Bio. She's wrote this thing, and like, I think you should know her, and maybe you can produce it. And I was like, Larry, we were in a room together for like 2 days. Like, you don't know me, you don't even know if I'm a good producer. And he was like, I know. And he was like, and you need to work together. So for me, it's just really about relationships and just going. And I think if you have a vision for yourself, no one can take you away from that. And my whole thought process was, whether it's 5 years or 50 years, it's gonna happen. So just stay in the game.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ashley Denise Robinson. I represent Township Theater in LA, actor and writer from LA and New York. Thank you, Marcia, for facilitating this. A lot of my questions got answered purely from your questions. Alberto Bonilla says hi.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so my question as an actor who has sought out representation often and gotten very frustrated with the process, I'm wondering what translates to dollar signs or to intrigue for you, because what I think translates, what I think would be interesting in having somebody represent me, South by Southwest, LA Times, New York Times, the past year, may not translate to a rep. So I'm wondering what looks like money, or looks like opportunity, looks like potential for you if you receive something from an actor.
Yeah, I think for me, it looks like relationship more than the other things that you mentioned, because I want to make sure that we're in lockstep together, and I really construe the relationship like a partnership. You know, there are things that like you're gonna need from me, there are things that I need from you, etc. I have a sort of just a gut instinct about it. Do I think I can be a good advocate for you? And like, do I think you're talented? Do I like your training? Do I like your look? Like all of those things, because there have been a couple of people who have knocked on my door who work all the time. I don't like the work. So I don't work with them. And I could easily do it and take the money.
Yeah.
Right.
But that doesn't align with my integrity. So I think for me, it's about the relationship and the vision that I have for you. And it could be, all of those things could be very shiny to one person and not the other. I think you as a creator, just keep building and just keep creating, because content is king. And eventually you'll find the right fit, you know? And some people may just be a stepping stone and be here for a season, and some people may be that person that is with you for forever. And you know, you watch an award season, they're like, thank you to my manager of 20 years, blah, 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 you know. Those are the people who had the vision and believed in them, even when they weren't working. You know, when they were just, you know, no one would see them, but they believed in them and they just kept pushing.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm wondering when you are producing, and I know you said you have a pretty slim client list, how does that balance with, you know, making sure your actors are being seen when you're producing something as well?
Well, you should ask Alberto that and see if he feels taken care of. You know, I just try to do as much as I can and practice grace with myself. You know, there are days that I'm sure I'm a better manager than a producer and vice versa, you know, but I think that they all fuel one another. You know, the more that I can produce and then I'm making relationships with literary agents and casting directors, and then it's like, oh, like, for example, now having just done a show with the public, and they've been very kind to me and have brought me into the family. I was having a meeting about something else, and I was like, I need to meet the person in charge of the mobile unit because I want to pitch Alberto as a director. You know what I mean? So all of those things for me really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
How I got American Son was through my client, as I mentioned. How I ended up being a producer on Ain't Too Proud, which was the show that really changed my career, was because one of my clients was in the workshop and just invited me to the presentation.
Wow.
I went as his manager, and I left as a producer of that show.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the National Black Theater and Fat Ham, it didn't go from the public, but everyone talks about the public, even you. But it was the National Black that developed it. Why don't you talk about it?
I try to include it in the narrative as a co-production, and I think I did say that, but I think naturally people just say the public because that's where the physical production happened. It's like with Avenue Q was a co-production between the Vineyard and the group, and everyone says the Vineyard because that's where it was. But it's not a slight on National Black Theater, and I think that we could probably be more intentional about including it in. It's my understanding that it was co-developed by both, but National Black Theater is where that relationship started.
And they
6
need
years
the
ago.
visibility. The nonprofits need the visibility in order to raise money to continue to develop. And
I agree with you, and I think that's why we made a space for them to not only be the originating producer of the show, but to also be a co-producer on the show.
See, when an artist like you come along, man, these nonprofits are so proud and feel so good and will do anything, you know? And they don't want to be left out, in a sense. You know, I don't know if it costs $5 million to do a play, will the investors that National Black bring in make their money back, or are they just like everybody else and maybe make that money back? Because I understand MJ might make his money back, Hamilton, of course, make Zip's money back, but the smaller shows don't seem to make their money back. And the producers like Stephen Bird, you say he's the producer on MJ, but you know he's not the lead producer.
Correct.
And you may be the producer on 15 shows, but maybe not the lead producer, but you're doing all the work because you love it so much. So how because we're going through the same thing in New Federal now. With a show we want to take to Broadway called Telling Tales Out of School. And how do we know how to reach you? Do we just reach you by letter or phone call, or how do we, I know you get all these calls all the time, but it's not like the old days, you know. This is a new regime, I think. Yeah. Just listening to you, man, whoa, you know. And you know, it's not like you take plays to Australia. You can get to contact Australia, to London, to Paris, and other places we took plays to in the early days. They didn't know who Indizaki was. They didn't know who Denzel was when we ended up in all these places. But they knew once we got back to New York. And the producers like you would say, oh wow, man, I got in Denzel. And you would have him. You would know he would be working for you through your first movie.
Right.
Okay. So how do we do that? How do we do, is that a hard question?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I think it's really just about inviting people to the work. I mean, so Saheem is my best friend, and when he asked me if I wanted to do Fat Ham, I said no, because I was working on Music Man. I just started working on Top Dog, and I was like, I just don't think I could physically do it. And you know who made me reconsider? Jonathan at NBT. He said, you need to do this show. I was like, I just can't. I was like, he was like, he would not take no for an answer. You know, so I think it's really about just being in conversation with the people that you want to communicate with, you know. And there's so many Black producers that are coming up through the pipeline that I'm really excited about. So when you have your productions, when you have your readings, invite us. And have us come, you know? And it may not be for me, and it may not be for this person, but maybe I know somebody that it's right, you know what I mean? Maybe, you know, because there's more than just me and Ron Simons and Steven, you know? There are other people who are coming, and I've gotten to meet a lot of them through, you know, the Broadway League Fellowship, and now BTC's Fellowship, and all these other places, and I think it's an important conversation to have. We definitely need more. I mean, the fact that National Black Theater was the first theater in 50 years? Black theater to transfer a show to Broadway in 50 years?
Been a long time.
Yeah, we don't want it to be another 50.
Okay, we have time for a couple of more questions you have.
I got one more, but please, who hasn't? Who hasn't?
Right here.
What were the major transferable skills you found when transitioning to representation?
Communication, empathy, patience, learning how to communicate with each person as an individual, and understanding what each person needed, I think was really important, because everybody responds in a different way. There's a part of me that's consistent. Like, there's a part of me who's like, I don't like nonsense, you know what I mean? Like, you can cry on the phone to me, but like 30 seconds and I'm gonna be like, okay, are you done? But I let you get a couple tears out, and then we gotta move on. But just, you know, just understanding the individual, and that it's very vulnerable to be an artist. And though I've never been an actor, I've never really been a writer or anything like that, but I have a lot of friends who are, and so it's understanding how to give feedback. You know, you can't just be like, that was bad. You have to, you know, say like, okay, I like, congratulations on getting that done, or I saw what you were doing there, but can I give you a different perspective? Or, you know, try to really be constructive as opposed to destructive. And so I think that is really the most important thing, and also creating and fostering trust so that people can do their best work. But if people are always on guard because they're like, oh my God, Rashard is gonna slice and dice me, they can't, you know what I mean? They can't really do what they're gonna do. So, in my opinion.
I think, Brother, did you have your hand up before?
Oh, no, man.
Okay. All right, and you wanted to do one more?
Just a follow-up, just maybe it's a final
Sure.
question, I don't know, but you've spoken so eloquently about, Broadway shows and, I was very lucky as a young actor to do Prelude to a Kiss at the Helen Hayes Theater years and years and years ago. And I never thought in my early, it was a terrific cast, but I didn't think it was a Broadway show. It was great to be off Broadway. We did a wonderful job. But what is a Broadway show? What is it? What is a Broadway show? When you see something, he says, that is a Broadway show. I want to take that show. Or, no, this show will do well at Manhattan Theater Club, or Circle in the Square, or Circle Rep, or Pittsburgh Public Theater, but it's not a Broadway show.
It's so subjective, because there are things, this is why when I was coming through the ranks again, there was nobody black. So Kevin was somebody that I really looked up to because he did shows that weren't inherently commercial and made them commercial. With Rent, Avenue Q, and what was the third one? In the Heights.
Great.
Some of it is just being able to build the right audience, and some of it is lightning in the bottle.
Yeah.
Life of Pi should be a Broadway show, right?
Sure.
Great IP, great book, great movie, not so great Broadway show. So it just depends. But for me, it's about the message, timing, and the audience. When I finally agreed to meet with everyone about Fat Ham, I was like, okay, what can I bring to this? You've already accomplished everything. You won the Pulitzer, you've been sold out, you got great reviews. Why does this show need to go to Broadway? And when I thought about it from a business standpoint and from a human standpoint, I thought if I can help expand this narrative of joy and healing to a larger audience, I want to do that. And so it became a Broadway show because we made it a Broadway show.
I see.
And we wanted to handle it with care because it was moving to Broadway and because it was going from a 3/4 thrust to a proscenium. That's a different language, basically. How do we make it for that theater? Not making it bigger just because it was Broadway, but how do we really adapt it to the space? And I think we did it.
Yeah.
I think we did a good job. So for me, it's really about just kind of assessing all of those things that I named to determine whether you have a Broadway show. And then the last thing is the theater owners will let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course, my pleasure.
Thank you.
So I want to thank Rashid. I just changed your name. Rashard V. Chambers. For being with us. Thank you so very much. I have a mailing list. If you want to stay abreast of what's happening in New York, you can sign up here. Give me your name and your email address. And thank you for being with us this afternoon.